Good evening, and I'd like to call to order the District 67 Board of Education, City of Lake Forest Board of Education meeting for February 25th, 2014. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
Mrs. Fisher?
Here.
Mr. Schuler?
Here.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Here.
Mr. Borkowski?
Here.
Mr. Lemke?
Here.
Mr. Folker?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming. And our first item on our agenda tonight is going to be a musical performance. And to introduce our group, I'd like to introduce Superintendent Simic.
And I'd like to welcome Mrs. Truding and her students and say thank you, and tell us what you're going to do for us tonight.
Sure. My name is Sarah Truding. I have the honor of working with these students as well as many others. This is just a snapshot of what we have. This is a group that meets outside of the school day as a club. It's a multi-age group from 5th grade all the way to 8th grade. It is an audition-based group. We had the privilege of playing at the So an Ensemble Festival last Saturday, and we received the highest rating, which is superior rating, as well as 59 other events that represented Deer Path. So we're really happy with our performance. Several of the students in front of you not only received a superior rating, but a superior plus, which is the highest rating possible. So I'm very proud of them. We're going to be playing for you the piece that we played on Saturday. It's a very collaborative effort. It takes a tune from Lady Gaga and mix it with a Baroque style, and it's a very clever piece of music called Lady Gaga Fugue. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from board members? So how long did it take you to practice to get that together? What's the hardest or the coolest part of this piece?
I think it's a great way to combine the old genre and the new genre, and for it to really sparkle. It's a very creative piece. You guys think? I enjoyed it. Oh. We have people to give us scout meetings, as you can see, we have our Boy Scout here. And thank you very much for all your support for the years, and I love my job, and I love doing what I am passionate about, which is music, so thank you.
Thank you.
And we have another best in class, as it were. And Mrs. Courtney has brought a number of students, and it's very fitting for us because we spoke this morning to the DPM teachers about mission, vision, and goals, and what's next for us. And you have a 21st century learning project from your 8th grade group, I understand.
Yeah, it was really great timing for us. I am Mary Courtney, and I have the pleasure and the privilege of teaching these 8th graders language arts that they've come to present to you tonight. This project began in the late fall with an overarching question. How can we transform our classrooms into environments that help rather than hinder our district's philosophy of student-driven, self-directed, collaborative learning and teaching? In other words, how can we get our 20th century physical spaces to match our 21st century vision? So this question led to a lot of class discussion, and the inquiry just kept growing. And this group took it upon themselves to research how others have transformed their classrooms and how remarkably these transformations have benefited students like them. I believe this is passion-based, student-driven, collaborative learning at its most authentic and exciting. And I'm so proud to introduce the kids who made it happen. Grace Bentley, Jillian Buckhart, Elizabeth Clayton, Grace Duggan, Clara Finley, Jessica Pasquesi, John Mark Pintus, Jared Rose, Connor Sheridan, and Angela Zhao. Thank you. Take it away.
Hello, Board of Education, and thank you for allowing us to present to you tonight. Who you see in front of you is a group of 8th grade students who decided they wanted to make a difference in their classroom and quite possibly other ones. So together, we researched into 21st century classrooms. We asked students and teachers alike what they had and what they wanted in a classroom. We put together some information using the fantastically modern cube on the east side of DPM to show you what we think a 21st century classroom should look like.
Flexible, ergonomic furniture encourages teamwork and boosts collaboration. Technology integration allows students to connect easily with each other and with the world. But what about our classrooms? After using an iOS application to measure the sound of moving our current desks, we found that rearranging them into collaborative group formations produce sound over 100 decibels, equivalent to a chainsaw or a jackhammer. My mother, who went to school here in the 70s, sat in the same desks that we do today. So we put together a video of us moving the desks around just so you can see how hard it is and how loud it sounds.
classrooms are examples of bland color palettes, inefficient use of space, immobile furniture, insufficient natural light, and distracting noise. As you can see, we have 4 pictures of 20th century classrooms up here on the screen. 2 of them are very old pictures, but the other 2 are pictures of classrooms in our school taken only a week ago. Classrooms should be flexible and adaptable. They should have efficient, colorful, and engaging furnishings. The middle picture you see on this slide is a prototype for some of the 5th and 6th grade classrooms that is being put into effect. It is a really great step towards 21st century classrooms, but the 7th and 8th grade side would benefit from the same opportunities.
Research from the team that launched Microsoft suggests that environments designed to support self-directed learning provide a more direct route into understanding the actual dynamics and relationships between learning and technologies. Technology can help direction and focus by allowing a user to quickly find and record information. For students to successfully practice self-directed inquiry-based learning, they need to be able to arrange their learning environments in task-friendly ways.
Multifunctional furniture supports student-driven learning and collaboration. Being able to move freely allows students to collaborate easily while maintaining their independence. This ensures productivity during class. Whether it's appropriate to move into different groupings or retain personal space, flexibility increases class time for learning. The chair's pictures are called nodes. They have wheels on the bottom to allow for placement into collaboration, and the desks actually pivots for more collaborative approaches to the classroom. Exeter Academy is a system that exemplifies collaboration. Students sit together at tables, round tables that maximize their efficiency and ability to work together. The classroom environment is naturally evolving, and it allows the focus to be on the students' ideas.
As District 67 has already invested into technology for our school, it would only make sense to assimilate that with the 21st century classroom style. By having a monitor attached to a table, students would easily be able to connect up their computers. They would be able to share ideas and conduct research in a group. It would allow there to be seamless collaboration between students, and children would naturally become more immersed in their content. Integrating technology supports into our classroom would also improve the learning environment. Easy access to outlets on tables or desks would be convenient and eliminate the hazard of tripping when walking. Plus, the distractions of kids getting up to plug in their outlets would no longer exist, creating a more 21st century classroom.
Our district's classroom spaces should reflect the District 67 philosophy of student-driven learning, in which problem-solving, creativity, and self-assessment are in the spotlight. An adaptive classroom with tables or desks that promotes collaboration has significant benefit towards the students. Research from the University of New England found that flexible classroom furniture positively affects the student productivity by increasing focus and attentiveness. The research also says that the 21st century structure for a classroom allows the students to efficiently transition to new projects and form groups.
Ergonomic furniture should adjust easily for each student, eliminate distractingly awkward learning environments, and enhance performance by allowing students to focus on tasks rather than their own discomfort. Studies done by the National Institutes of Health have shown that sitting in one-size-fits-all desks and chairs can lead to a series of back problems, which leads to unfocused work and a lack of deep thinking in the classroom. I personally am afflicted with scoliosis and sway back, and on days when my back hurts more than usual, it makes it really hard to focus in class with the uncomfortable desks.
Students tend to feel more tired in darker classrooms, while a more colorful environment will enhance the learning process for them. Studies conducted at the University of British Columbia suggest that the color of a learning environment can make a big difference in engagement and productivity in class. For instance, red improves accuracy, yellow stimulates the brain, green helps enhance communication, blue improves creativity, and purple helps with logic skills.
Thank you for your time and watching and listening to our presentation. We hope you consider ideas for our plan for our district for our district's classrooms for the future.
So if you have any questions, we are happy to answer them for you.
I have two questions. One, did any of you take this opportunity as a result of your learnings to put in a grant to the Spirit of 67?
We tried last year and we were denied.
How about this year?
Pardon?
This year for this?
Well, we wanted the same thing, so we figured.
Okay. Okay.
We have tried that, and so we're trying something else.
And fair enough. Fair enough. And then you're 8th graders, right? From your experience, and not just for yourselves, but for your classmates and the 7th graders as well, how often do you guys use the cube?
Well, since we're on the completely opposite side of the school, I've only been in there like once or twice, and that was for web, so.
I know my little sister, though, she's on the 5th grade side, and she says that she uses the cube almost once a week. She says that it's really one of the places that they look forward to going to during class.
Other questions from board members? Lesley?
I'd just like to make a comment. Excellent presentation. You know, it's interesting when a few years back, when those of us who were here at the time, Rick and Bill and myself, went ahead and gave the funding and worked on the establishment of the cube. The idea was to build a space that we could all look towards, to emulate, so that we could eventually duplicate a space or spaces like that. Your time here is a little bit in between in that you get to see it a little bit, but you really don't get to enjoy it. And that's a difficult thing to live through. And I appreciate you making this case and going out of your way to expose all of us to this, because it's really important for us to see, especially as we're in the midst of our visioning process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We will move on with our agenda. The board met in executive session at 6 o'clock this evening, and no action was taken. The next item on the agenda is the President's report. And District 67 lost a great friend recently, Mr. Mark Mitter. And I had the honor of serving as a community representative on the Finance Committee while Mark was chairman. And it was a great experience, and he was just an amazing professional. Mark served on the Board of Education from District 67 from 2000 through 2009. And he was president of the board in 2008 and 2009. He also served as chairman of the Finance Committee, chairman of the Budget Committee, member of the Joint Shared Services Committee, liaison to the City of Lake Forest. And very importantly, Mark was instrumental in establishing the Emotional Wellness Initiative in our district. In true keeping with his dedication to the children of Lake Forest, his wife, Mary Kay, indicated that one of her wishes was that in lieu of donations, in lieu of flowers, donations be made to the Spirit of 67. So thanks to Mark and best wishes to his family. He represented the best of public service in Lake Forest. That concludes the President's report. The next item on the agenda is the Superintendent's report. Mr. Simmet.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I have taken the liberty of having the students come as our Superintendent's report for the evening. I'd like to add one comment on to yours about Mr. Mitter, the privilege of passing on a check to the Spirit from donations that were made in his memory.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is public participation. Are there any members of the public, and I will say not related to me, who would like to address the board on a topic of their choosing? Seeing none. We will move to the next item on the agenda, which is reports and discussions. The first item is the update on the LASIC committee. Mr. Simic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. Would you like me to report here on, there's also an action item later on? Or would you like me to hold my report till then, or shall I go ahead and present it now?
I think there might be more people here now.
Okay.
And if it's okay, why don't you go ahead and do it now?
Very good. Thank you, Cornelius. So we have had a long and very interesting journey with our LASIC committee, and the board has taken a great deal of time to consider what possible steps we might take moving forward. And I wanted to present a couple key items that were part of our most recent consideration here. A friend of mine, Rob Glass, superintendent in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, likes to say that the more complex an issue is, the more opportunities you need to process it. And he also adds that how important it is that you do so, especially with a decision that affects so many students and so many families across our district. And the lack of processing related to a very complex issue and complex program, the Mandarin Immersion Program, is in no small part related to how the situation that we find ourselves in today, the consequences that we have from that. This is, without any question, the most complex issue I have encountered in 13 years of being a superintendent, and I'll explain a little bit why. There are all sorts of if-thens for the Mandarin Immersion Program and considering the future of a foreign language in district. If we expand immersion to other schools, and we've done polling on this, we wind up spreading a potential unintended set of consequences to more schools. And one of the things we heard back from some parents, don't want to say all parents, but some parents, is if this does for our school what it has done for Cherokee, we have a real problem. One of those consequences of the issue of the program at Cherokee, this is something that all parties agree is very undesirable, is the fact that the building has become dominated by one program. And the example of what that looks like at Cherokee right now is that we have 18 students that are in the English program, and those students will then matriculate through the system. So for the next 5 years, they have the same peer group. And there is no one that I've spoken to that thinks that is desirable for their children or for other people's children, especially when you look at people that have moved into the community in order to have a neighborhood school, a school that they can walk to. If we ration slots to our Mandarin program, we exacerbate real or perceptions that the program is in some way elitist. The fact of the matter is that anyone that has asked to be in the program has been admitted to the program. But if you ration slots, it will increase the likelihood that people will see it in some way, shape, or form as being elitist. If we leave the program as it exists today and allow it to continue forward, we're saying by default that we have very small groups of children, 18 this year, and that is an acceptable way to move forward. And we don't know anybody that does think that that is an acceptable way to move forward. Likewise, if we eliminate the program as it exists today, what we know that we have incredibly positive parents. We also know how hard it is to implement a program like an immersion program. It is innovative. It is unusual, especially for a community like ours to have a program like this. It does differentiate us, and very importantly, it is the only program that we have in the district today where our principal's phone rings daily with inquiries saying, I understand you have this program, and I'd like to buy a house there because of it. This is the only specific program that we have that does this for us today. LASIK's overarching direction, it was not unanimous, but it did provide general direction that was widely agreed upon, and that was more language for more kids, and to the degree possible, younger. There are overarching themes that work their way through our consideration of the foreign language program, and also any consideration that we have of what do we do, what should be next. And the first among those is sort of the elephant in the room, is whether or not we believe in neighborhood schools. Because whether we want to admit it or not, the fact of the matter is that the immersion program in Cherokee has fundamentally changed the nature of one of our neighborhood schools, and has done so in a way that unfortunately has been very, very difficult for families. The families that come to us and say, you know, I had a fourth grader go through this building a couple of years ago, and now I have a first grader, and the building is not the same building it was then. And we hear that with great sadness, very frankly. We also hear how incredibly popular and supportive and articulate and passionate the parents are who speak with their children in the Mandarin program. So a program that is incredibly hard to implement has been done so with remarkably few blips in the road, except for the unintended consequences. So one of our questions is, which is of greater value to our community, our neighborhood schools, or immersion learning in terms of language? And, of course, can we do both of these things well? They are both highly, highly desirable, but do we have the ability to execute them both? Asynchronous, which is a one-off program, a program that is somehow very different in whatever way from everything else that you operate. And one of the interesting conversations with our school board was that what looks like something that is out of whack can also be something that is unique and applies and differentiates for students, that is enriching for them. On the other end of that is a uniform application from an organizational perspective. One of the things that a uniform application does for us, which means every student gets the same treatment. Everybody gets math, science, history, English, and a foreign language. The benefit of that is that it, on the one hand, is very restrictive because everybody gets the same thing. On the other hand, it allows for very significant flexibility in every other aspect of programming. And that flexibility might well be more important to us than the lack of flexibility in terms of foreign language. Finally, we have declining enrollment, and this needs a caveat because last year we talked a lot about declining enrollment as well, and we had a huge influx of families. We did not have a huge influx of kindergarten families. One of the track record of the district, by and large, over the years has been families move to Lake Forest in their middle school years because that's when they can afford to buy a home here. The housing prices are very prohibitive. So with our declining enrollment, as it currently stands, we have a kindergarten class that is 122 students smaller than our 8th grade class. So we have 149 students in kindergarten right now. 122 more students will graduate in 8th grade. So the students that we saw earlier in the two programs, the music and the Mrs. Courtney's class, those students have a significantly larger group. The impact that that has on your foreign language program and all your programs is that as the students work their way through, if the cohort remains small, that means that the number of languages that we offer dwindle in the number of students that are able to take them. And so what that means is the very wide range of programs that we have in foreign language and everything else will have significantly less demand. So what do we do? How many languages can we offer and offer effectively We already have one foreign language class in 4th grade that has 6 students in it. Now, a few districts in the world can afford to have a foreign language class with 6 students in it. We happen to be able to do that. The question winds up being, how effective is that programming moving forward? And as a really small cohort of students comes through, what that 6 turns into what number then? So we could do a Socratic method. Every student gets his or her own teacher. That would be prohibitive, obviously. The upshot of what I'm saying is that immersion has recognizable benefits for both learning and for life. It differentiates our students. About 1% of students nationally are learning Mandarin. That is a very significant advantage. Language learning at an early age does things for the brain that other things do not do. Just like music does things for the brain that other things do not do. There are big benefits there. What we are struggling to do is to find a way to maintain both language immersion and our neighborhood schools. And I cannot tell you how many hours the administrators have struggled with this, the board has struggled with this. We grapple with it, and we come back and we say, let's keep on trying to find a way to do this, to try to meet everybody's need. And there are times when you give up and say, all right, we're going to go this route, and then somebody says, hang on a minute, let's think that over again. So we've spent a huge amount of time working on that. If we want to have an immersion program, and we want to maintain it, and this is, again, part of the struggle, we believe that we'll need to expand the number of languages that we offer. So not just immersion. We know from the survey results that we just received that far more parents are interested in Spanish immersion, and there is a significant number of parents that are interested in Spanish immersion than in Mandarin immersion. So if you expand the number of languages, you expand the number of families that you're serving. These are very desirable things. You also wind up fundamentally changing one of your neighborhood schools. That is Cherokee. Cherokee, by default, becomes an immersion school. And then also, depending on what happens at Sheridan, just to speak of Sheridan, Everett has a student population that could have a number of students that move out. But if a large number of students move out from Sheridan and say, you know what, we really want to be in programming that has immersion because we see the benefits of it, we have now affected 2 of our neighborhood schools. And Sheridan is tiny as is. We have somewhere around 30 students right now in kindergarten. So if you assume that that trend continues and a number of parents sign up to move their children to an immersion program, which is something that you can imagine that they might want to do, now you have 2 of your 3 elementary buildings that are very significantly impacted by an immersion program, all through a program that is very beneficial. And we believe that our parents and our community place tremendous value on our neighborhood schools. It drives home choices, and it drives home buying decisions. And we hear that from our realtors. And the feedback that we get from realtors on the Mandarin program is sort of a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Boy, you want to buy a house there, and I'm not sure if I want to buy a house there. Some people have home showings specifically because the Mandarin program is in the neighborhood, and other families, no, I think I'm going to go somewhere else because I know what I'm getting. The question of what a neighborhood school is an interesting one. So different people define neighborhood schools in different ways. One person defines a neighborhood school as I walk to my school and it's a block and a half away, therefore, that's my neighborhood school. Somebody else, a half a mile away or a mile away, goes to the same school and defines their neighborhood school as wherever the kids on my block go. Those differences are important. So the question for our community will wind up being, and we're going to find ways to process this, is how much value do you place moving forward as a community on the neighborhood school concept as it currently exists. I can tell you without any question that Sheridan, in particular, we are going to struggle to keep all three, no matter what we do. If our enrollment trend continues, we're going to struggle to keep all three of our elementaries as is, because it's simply too tiny. So will we run an elementary school with 150 students in it? Will we run an elementary school with 100 students in it? When we get below 200, what will we do? Redistricting is sort of everyone's worst nightmare, very frankly, because it is unpopular with every single person in our community. And it's been great working here. So what's next for next year? All of our students will continue in their current immersion programs. All students in current immersion programs continue in immersion. All language options will continue for next year as they have been. Our recommendation is that next year, kindergarten is getting ready for school, and we would not offer immersion or a language in kindergarten for next year. That is the administrative recommendation at this point, and we've discussed this at great length as administrative team and also as with the board. And what we want to do is we want to go and gather more information and consider options with an eye for expanded language programs for all students in the district. Is there a way that we can offer foreign language to every student in the district? If so, how would we do that? And is there a way that we can retain our immersion program? And what this isn't a extended out for the next year or year and a half. What this is looking at, is there a way to retain programming that is so important and popular with our families and maintain a neighborhood school concept that works for families? And it may be that we cannot, but it may be that we can. And it's the old college try, if you will, to try to meet the needs of very different families that we have and not have the undesirable situation that we currently have with the 18 kids moving through year after year. The first thing we needed was was clarity on kindergarten for next year. We had to have that so that parents could enroll their children. And I know some of you are in the audience with a child that is headed into kindergarten. It's a very important decision for you. And we needed to have that unequivocal, this is where we're going for right now. Within the next month, we want to process these ideas through 3 different groups. We want to pull our LASIC committee back together and run various scenarios past them. We want to pull our APT leaders back together and ask them, and we want to pull Cherokee, the entire Cherokee APT together and talk to them about these things. Going back to the first slide, the more complicated an issue is, the more you need to process it. And while we have struggled mightily with this, we know that there's not an indefinite timeline on how long we should take to make a decision, but we want to give it our absolute best chance possible to consider and reconsider, and these are the ways that we plan on doing it. So down the road, we want to complete our mission and vision process. We want to work with the board to determine the level of investment they desire in our language programs. There are a great many things that we can do. And to quote Machiavelli, in order to be effective, we must be vastly indifferent to a great many worthwhile activities. So if we are going to be good at one thing, that means that we won't have the resources to do another thing. So how many dollars we want to direct at our language program? We want to explore starting in 1st or 2nd grade. One of the things we heard loud and clear from our families was kindergarten was awesome for the families that were in immersion, but it fundamentally changed many families' ability to make connections. And what so often happens is the connections that you have with families in your neighborhood, you establish in kindergarten. And so it is as much about the parents in that way as it is about the kids, because the parents' connection is very important there, and they develop lifelong friendships. We want to calculate the costs of various program choices, examine our enrollment to the degree we can, determine our language options, what choices do we have, And there will be other issues that we haven't even thought about yet that will come up as we kick these things around with parents. When we talk to parents, we are open. We test out different ideas. That's one of the things we want to do, and we bring them back to the board. And in the board, we have 7 smart people who are charged with making the decisions for the community. They are the trustees of the community. The community has entrusted these decisions to our board. We entrust our finances to the board. We entrust decisions like this to the board, and the leaders in our community, our 7 elected officials, have to at some point lead. And that leadership might be in a direction that is not initially popular, but it is best for the children of the community. And they need to do so with conviction. So a great deal of responsibility is placed on our board, and I can tell you they take their job unimaginably seriously. And they hear and they recognize the impact of all of their decision making. And with that, that is our administrative recommendation. Later on in the agenda, it is my recommendation that the board, if it so chooses, votes on what happens with kindergarten or not, takes a general direction. That is the board's decision. And also allows the administration to work with various groups until such time as the board approves its mission and vision and goals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simic, for that very comprehensive report. Are there any board members who have questions or comments on this topic?
The only thing I'd like to say is, in addition to the incoming kindergarten parents who have been really patient with this process, I also want to thank the families who are currently enrolled in the immersion process and who are currently not enrolled in the immersion process. So I want to thank everyone for their patience. Uncertainty is really, really tough to deal with. We see it from your perspective. We see it from our perspective. We are trying to be extremely thoughtful, as our administrators are, to make sure that the program we put in place is best for all, as the best as we can to our abilities. So thank you for your patience.
I also just want to thank all of the parents and the educators. I know some of you are here today who invested evening after evening, month after month into the LASIC process. I know sometimes you start a committee and you wonder, gosh, are they really taking my work to heart? Was this really worth my time? And I can definitely say it was. We have looked over everything that came out of that process. I know it was very eye-opening for me, and I think I speak for Lesley when I say for her as well. And we just so appreciate the learning and the investment that you put into that process. And I am really happy that we'll be coming back, circling back around with all of you to continue the dialogue. So thank you.
I would just, I guess, voice my support what the superintendent has just laid out. And many of you I know from Cherokee, and you know that I like to move decisions along and not continue to kick the can. And we had a long discussion about that topic tonight as well as other nights. And one of the important things to understand that he said was, we've made a decision to not have kindergarten next year. We have also put boundaries for ourselves. We've put a stake in the ground that there will be. You walk away tonight with half an answer. You understand what happens with kindergarten. You don't understand what happens beyond that, and we don't know that either. But we have put a stake in the ground that we will have a decision, and it's not a year away. It's weeks or months away. And while that can continue to be frustrating, take some solace and understand that we are serious about figuring this out.
Yeah, relative to Mike's point about a short-term solution versus a long-term solution, I know a lot of us felt very strongly that the importance of the strategic planning process, the mission and vision process, is really going to help us drive what the community would like. And I know that I've tried to reach out to as many people as possible to engage the community in this process, and this is a great example as to why you need to be involved. The overarching theme of neighborhood schools and the issue that we have when our student body is divided amongst 3 schools. Without scale, innovation is difficult. but we all believe innovation is crucial for our district. So as a result, we need to make some tough choices relative to, in our current environment, where do we place innovation versus the maintenance of a neighborhood school? And I know, at least from my perspective, I probably define neighborhood school a little differently than some folks. I don't live near a school. My neighborhood school is the school my kids go to with their friends down the street. It's not because I walk to the school, but I know some people have a different definition of that regard. So as we go through the mission and vision process, I really urge people to get involved to help us understand from a community perspective how we view neighborhood schools in Lake Forest so that we can help meld that into our decision for world language and other innovative programs.
Thank you very much for that report. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is an update on the food service program. And it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Jen Hermes. Ms. Hermes.
Thank you, members of the board. I'm excited to be here tonight to provide an update on the Food Service Task Force Committee. On January 23rd, the task force did complete their charge by formalizing, not yet, it's the big reveal, it's coming. Because if I put it up there, you would be reading it. So they did meet on January 23rd to formalize some recommendations regarding our food service program. The committee was comprised of 16 members, including 2 parent representatives from each school, nurses, administration, the APT Food Service Executive Board Chairman, and I believe we had 2 board members that were able to attend all but 1 meeting. So that was a pretty great turnout. We met from October through January. And we kind of began the process with discussion about our survey results from last year. We reviewed other schools' programs from around the state. We discussed best practices, identified elements of what a desirable school food service program would look like. And from those discussions, we were able to develop 4 broad recommendations, and then there are some specific details below each of those categories. So I will reveal them now. I feel like I should have like a drum roll. Can't see how great they are. The first recommendation was in regard to nutritional guidelines. Actually, during the work of the committee, really the results didn't end up kind of how I had anticipated. The recommendations on the nutritional guidelines were in grains, switching from multi-grain to a whole grain. Comprehensive review of our a la carte program, which we do have specific requirements on the components of our a la carte program. Those are the non-entree items that you can purchase at Deer Path. And looking at some more healthy options, someone had thought perhaps we can look at hummus and some vegetable combos type of things. Reduce added sugar when possible was also something that came out as part of that recommendation. Recommendation number 2 was menu focus. A large theme was less is more. Do it well. So it wasn't perhaps that we didn't have the variety in our program or we didn't do interesting and innovative type of entrees, was that perhaps we had gotten to the point where we were too complicated. That we needed to simplify. Kid-friendly food, maybe increase some ethnic diversity, but also provide some consistency. So it's okay to repeat menu items, but really try to do them well. Those are just examples. Chicken Tuesday, I'm not saying it's the same chicken every Tuesday. Today, or it might be baked chicken today. It might be chicken in a different form, just like you would at home on Tuesday. But you can rely on that there was going to be chicken every Tuesday. If you like chicken, you would probably like the entree on Tuesdays. Those type of theme days. We also talked a little bit and we'll get to this a little bit at the end, but we can also tie those theme days to curricular units. For instance, we've done a World Fair concept. So we can bring in some of our ethnic diversity and tie theme days to those curricular units. Recommendation number 3 was really the most expansive, and there has been a considerable amount of time talking about enhancing our marketing and communication. There were many individuals on the committee that, although they were interested in food service, really weren't aware of exactly what our program was. So they've really been able to provide us with some direction, advertise and market to parents out of all the changes, showcase our food service a little better at our school events. So parent night, open house, curriculum. That may be sampling, that may be a mock cafeteria, that may be walking a new 5th grader at an event at the school through how you would go through the lunch line type of a concept. Explore have lunch with your child option. That was at the elementary school. Now we couldn't say all the parents come on in, at one time because we couldn't handle that many, but could we do it on a rotational basis? 1st grade this week, 2nd grade a different week, or by class? Absolutely, where we can have the parent come in and maybe join their son or daughter for lunch. Increase use of our weekly newsletters and our website, and I believe Ms. Whipple will have some ideas regarding that. We have started some of that. You've seen, I think it's called Tidbits, where we do put out information in the weeklies on that. Create food service videos came up, is maybe because, you saw our students today. They're pretty fantastic. Way more creative than Alan and I would ever be. But maybe we could do videos of an experience of walking through the cafeteria that we could show, let's say, 5th graders going to Deer Path, or to a 1st grader that is going to be going to all-day school for the first time and is going to have lunch at Cherokee or Everett, that, a 4th grader might be able to participate in a video to say, hey, this is what you do when you come to the cafeteria. Were you aware we had fruit and veggies over here? Those type of things, and make a fun video. Keep our nutritional analysis updated. We do have nutritionals on the website. They do not get a ton of hits, but we really need to work a little harder on keeping those up to date. We're introducing new products, so making sure that we keep that up to date at all times. Communicate our district standards. This is, I think, fundamental to our program. Came out loud and clear, I think, in this task force. But the information on what does Quest do versus what is our district program. What are our standards in regards to our grains? What are our standards in regard to calorie count on our a la carte items? What are our standards or policies or practices on food allergies? Those type of standards and communication regarding our program. Definitely need to do some work in that area. Recommendation number 4, strengthen our connection to nutrition education. One, we talked about the theme days, but also we were very fortunate to have Renee DeVore join our committee. Renee not only is the principal at DPM 7-8, but she also leads the district wellness committee. So there was some information we were able to pass to them to say this is an area that came through on the food service task force, and allow the educators and professionals in that wellness area to look at their curriculum, look where there might be a connection. They are teaching the My Plate philosophy, which those of you that are familiar with the United States initiative on this as well. Are there some things that we connect? If they're learning My Plate in the classroom, can we maybe look at our trays that we serve food on and mirror the My Tray philosophy? If you're not familiar, I was going to bring a visual. I had a great visual on this, but basically My Plate is not so much a food pyramid as looking at your plate and what piece of that plate should be allocated to fruits, veggies, proteins, etc. So it's a little bit about portion size and working from there. But maybe we can tie into that, and we've been investigating new trays or new marketing around that. So there's that direct connection. So those are the 4 basic categories. I also wanted to take an opportunity because we had a very welcome addition to our committee. We were very pleased, very fortunate to have Ms. Kate Abernathy, who is here tonight, and I'll give her an opportunity to talk a little bit about her participation on the committee. But she was a clinical dietitian that Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital very graciously loaned us. Kate's background includes working in a variety of healthcare settings, including the former Children's Memorial Hospital, now Lurie Children's Hospital in downtown Chicago, and we really felt that her professional expertise provided the committee significant insight and direction. She really just has much more of a professional depth of understanding than many of us. So I will give Kate the opportunity to talk a little bit about her participation, and then we'll provide a conclusion.
Good evening. A little shorter than you, sorry about that. It's been quite a pleasure to work with the Food Service Task Force Committee through this whole process, and being with someone who does live in the local community, it's been really interesting to see all of the different progressions that the food service has really, some of the recommendations that they've made. It's one of our big focuses at the hospital at this current point is to really drive wellness, making sure that when a patient comes in, they're not just getting a hamburger and fries because they're sick and we want them to eat. We want to provide good, nutritious food through that whole process. And what better way to get that wellness initiative focus is to start with our own kids in schools. So when I was contacted by this task force, it was quite a pleasure to join in and kind of really work together to team up. Some of the highlights and things that we really targeted on were some of the nutritional focus. Parents with kids and food allergies already seem to be getting a lot of what they need accomplished, and Quest has done a wonderful job making sure that those parents get what they need. But in terms of just overall nutritional guidance, if a parent wants to know how much fat or how much sodium is in their foods, they're not getting a lot of hits right now on the different website areas that have those nutritional standards. That's why one of the recommendations was to really focus in on making sure that that's maybe a little bit more user-friendly. Also, some very simple changes along with looking at the fat and the sodium is just making whole grains possible, and really just finding those really simple solutions to find ways to be able to provide those nutrition for kids. And then lastly, just really focusing on the strengths that are already occurring. I don't think a lot of parents really realized when they were taking that survey last year how wonderful the program already is, that 50% of fruits and vegetables are organic. A lot of schools aren't even near there, and really focusing on the strengths that the school district is focused on is pretty incredible. And so that's why really focusing on the marketing and the advertising, showing families how this works, what the process is, so that they understand kids can go back up to the fruit and vegetable bar as many times as they want to get those different types of things. Lake Forest is really above and beyond with what a lot of other schools are doing. A lot of other schools are fighting just to get the right number of fruits and vegetables in their programs, and Lake Forest is focusing more on what kinds of fresh fruits and vegetables that can be provided. So it's a pretty neat thing. So thank you for the opportunity. It's been a wonderful opportunity to work with the team here.
So if I had Mike's slide, the what's next kind of philosophy, we're going to really work with Quest. They've not seen these recommendations, and what we would recommend from this committee is that we give Quest an opportunity to respond to these changes. Also, we need to work with our internal staff. Some of these do cover a few other of our areas. Some of these do hit business. Some hit the communications department as well. And then we would do an evaluation of Quest's ability to respond. And this is what we talked about last year, is do we have a food service provider that is willing and able to make the changes that we would like to see in our program? So that would be the evaluation that we would recommend, is provide these to Quest, see what we could put together in a timeline between now and, we're running out of time as always, but now and late spring, and make their ability to make some of these happen part of their review this year. Happy to answer any questions from the board.
If we decided that they were not, or if we had a pretty robust conversation a year ago on should we be sending this out for bid, if we decided that we wanted to bid it out, what is the deadline for that? As you said, time's getting short.
Ideally, you can do it under any time frame. Ideally, what you would need your bidders to be able to see is your program in operation. So you would have to be able to get your bid on the street with an opportunity for walkthroughs before the end of school year. I would say if you're doing it much later than April, they would see it in operation, but you also need to be able to implement. There usually is they do usually take over the staff, so it's not like all the staff is gone. It's just really the management of that staff that takes place. We do own all of the equipment. We do own all of the supplies, so that really doesn't need to change. We do own the POS system. So you would probably need to make a decision by May at the latest, I would think, to make it effective.
And you'd expect the initial evaluation of Quest's capabilities by then?
I think they've been waiting to see the results of the Food Service Task Force. A little bit of what we heard in the committee wasn't that Quest isn't willing and able, but almost to some extent that they're too willing and able. They were starting to not only accommodate this and this and this, but they were trying to be everything for everybody, and that's where the less is more came from. We need to really focus on what we do and do it well, and go from there. So I think they are happily awaiting these recommendations, and I think within a very short timeline would come back with specifically what does that mean to the program, and here's the timeline for implementation.
Can you explain a little bit what reduced added sugar when possible means? I guess I have two reactions. One, it seems a little vague, and two, if I'm thinking back to the survey that we saw, I believe last May, there was a lot of parent concern about high fructose corn syrup specifically. So if you could talk about that.
High fructose corn syrup did not come through as a large theme as the Food Service Task Force. What, and my committee members may be able to help me here, but for example, is if we are serving something that has a syrup product, so our homemade French toast, for example, that you would serve a maple syrup dipping sauce. If some of those things are available in a reduced sugar option, then that would be what our first choice would be. And Kate may be able to give more information because clearly she is the dietitian in the room and not I.
So would that mean it would have artificial sugar or no?
That conversation really got kind of tossed around a lot. Do we give our kids artificial sugars? And the answer is absolutely not. It's a lot of products contain a lot of additional sugars. So instead of canned fruit's a really easy example. Canned fruit can be packed in extra sugar, or it can be packed in its own juices. So instead of just giving your kid some canned peaches, let's give the kid the canned peaches with the packed in natural juices or in water. So you're not giving the extra calories, the extra sugars that just aren't needed.
And then one more question on nitrates, because that was another biggie on the survey in terms of popping up with parental concerns. I know we moved to the nitrate-free hot dog this year. Is there any talk about moving all of our processed meats to be nitrate-free?
Was not a theme that developed from the committee. We started from a large brainstorming of any and all ideas, and then we developed where did we have themes. Kate independently did an evaluation of our menus and provided recommendations without having seen the brainstorming of the committee. And then we identified what are the themes across both Kate's recommendations and the group. That was not a concern, I believe, even raised at those meetings.
I guess I'm confused because I thought the parent input that was done last May was going to help drive some of this, because we did solicit input from parents, and I think we had quite a few that responded to it. So I guess I'm...
If we looked at the survey, I don't recall the nitrates specifically being one of the high concentration areas. I believe there were some responses, yes.
Bill and I both participated in this process. However, we were both unable to be at the final meeting, which was when, you know, it was sort of larger thinking for the first 2 months. Then you came to the specifics the last meeting, which we were not present at. Is there a way, I am on the same page with Beth as far as high fructose corn syrup and nitrates, that I would like to do our best not to have those incorporated into our menus. Can we have add-ons here that we feel perhaps that we can agree on as a board that we would like to entertain with Quest?
The only concern I have with you adding some things like nitrates is that a lot of vegetables and fruits contain nitrates generally in naturally occurring forms. So when you start limiting things like that, you're going to have to be very specific to what kinds of things you're talking about, and nitrates specifically towards the processed foods. But when you're talking about some processed foods, naturally occurring nitrates are going to be a lot higher than what you're going to get in some processed foods. So by just eliminating that, you're naturally occurring fruits and vegetables, sometimes at this point you might be splitting hairs.
So maybe it should be reducing nitrates and high fructose corn syrup when possible. We could do our best, just like there are alternatives to the way you serve fruits or canned fruits.
Absolutely.
We can have a chicken tender that doesn't have any nitrates in it which I'm assuming we can do because it's not a fruit. Perhaps we can go
We
down.
make our own chicken tenders with breaking down chicken, so
that's
probably already there.
This is still at a bit of a 20,000-foot level, so the idea is to take it to Quest and then have them come back and say, well, if you want to implement these, here's the impact on pricing, here's the need in the kitchens in terms of any additional investment, that sort of thing?
Yes, it's to definitely get down to a more detailed level. We did see on the onset that there's a lot of high dollar issues on here. For example, we didn't see we should be 100% organic, which we know would have an immediate effect on price. There wasn't a lot of things identified that we thought would be a lot of cost, if any, but if there were, we would certainly have that information.
Also, I just want to say I'm very high on having lunch with the kids. I think letting the parents get into the lunchroom, that was one of the largest, most popular volunteer activities at Cherokee School, and unfortunately we lost it, and to get the parents a chance to get back in with the kids is fantastic.
I think that was a parent recommendation.
Jeff, can I assume you're talking about grade school, not middle school?
Your
Your middle school kid may just disown you at that point.
Yeah.
All right.
Not cool in middle school.
I'm not sure if we got a clear answer on Lesley and Beth's question. Are we going to add those two items to the list where possible? Are we not?
This is the Food Service Task Force recommendation. Obviously, the board has the ability to make any recommendation or request of Quest or changes to your food service program.
I'm wondering, Jen, can parents see what their kids buy if they go online?
Yes, for the most part. There are, as I say, at the elementary level, they really only have entree 1 and entree 2. So it'll show entree 1 or entree 2. It won't say specifically what that entree was, but if you were to match it up to the menu, yes. At the middle school level, you can see the a la carte items and an entree item if it was chosen.
And you can match it up, so if you wanted to as
yes.
a parent.
Yep.
Perhaps moving forward, would it be possible, well, I guess I'm certain it's possible, that one of us at least volunteers to go ahead and meet with Quest when you're speaking with them about these and continue to give our 2 cents on things that we find fundamentally are missing from this list?
Well, my 2 cents would be make sure the nutritional information is updated so parents can see it, and after that I wouldn't have a list.
I guess I'm looking for some type of feedback from people here right now.
Well, I guess I'm just a little confused because I know we spent a lot of time talking about it in I think it was the May board meeting about the parent survey and going through those results. And I remember the top 2 box scores on both nitrates and high fructose corn syrup being quite considerable as parent concerns. And I think it's unfair to ask parents to give their feedback and then kind of not incorporate it at all. So I'd really like us to revisit that.
Beth, I would love the opportunity to bring that survey back up because we did, as you know, implement quite a comprehensive plan after that survey. For instance, I do know one of the larger items across the entire survey was less processed foods. And we had a step-by-step timeline on reducing the processed foods, the hiring the chef, the making our chicken products from scratch, making homemade French toast, those type of things, making our own pulled pork. Those type of changes were implemented last spring. So if you would like us to bring back those survey results and review them on the change, or maybe what's been done and what hasn't been done, in contrast or compare that to this list, is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I guess, Lesley just asked for feedback from the other board members. I foolishly make my kids lunch every day, so this doesn't impact me, but I'm hearing board members saying, let's use that survey, and what's the downside of adding these statements? I don't see any downside. We're not taking anything off this. The task force did great work, but the board wants a couple additional things on there. I'm with you guys 100%.
Yeah, Jen's saying some of them may have been implemented and all, but I think from the board standpoint, we haven't really heard about this since we heard about the survey, so it would be worthwhile to have an update on what the concerns were in the survey and what's been done about them. So.
I think what Jen is saying is she already brought that back to the board, which I remember, that these are the changes that are going to be made by the end of the year that you had brought last year. Perhaps we need a review of that It's been out of our eye for a while, and I would be in support of having board member representation at a meeting with Quest.
Does Quest have data on how many meals are purchased by school, particularly at the elementary level? But can they say on a given day when this menu item was in place, we only had X% of the students that purchased?
Yes, we can see trends. At the elementary, it's a little bit easier because your only choices are entree 1 and entree 2. At the middle school, it becomes a little more difficult because a kid could put together their lunch by buying a deli sandwich over here and a piece of whole fruit. That would appear as 2 items and not as a meal, even though that's how they've put together their meal. Elementary, it's very easy.
And I assume that'll help drive the less is better discussion.
The less is more. We do track that also on our on the production records, so we know how much of something is being served. For instance, we serve a very, very small vegetarian group. We might serve 7 vegetarian sandwiches on any given day across all 3 elementary schools. But it's really not that hard to make 7 vegetarian sandwiches and make sure that they're available at the schools that day. So some are very low participation, but we just adjust productivity, production accordingly. Some things you can't do in small size. If we were going to make a vegetarian lasagna to serve at each school, there could be, and we do serve that, but may not be as high, and there may be more waste on those days.
Jen, thank you. Good questions from the board, and obviously a lot of interest in this topic, and thank you for the work you've done on it so far. So appreciate it. Thank you. Next on our agenda is board committee reports. And the first this evening is the Board Education Committee, chaired by Lesley Fisher.
Good evening again. The Education Committee met on Tuesday, February 18th, 8:15 to 10:20 a.m. And all committee members were present, including our community members, our administration, our board members, and we had guests from the administration as well as additional board members. The first thing that was on our agenda was the acceptance of our committee charter, which we had worked on at the previous meeting, and what we wanted to do was refine the committee charter. Really, what we know as an education committee, what we're here for, but let's put it into words and let's make it clear. So for the people involved, we're all on the same page. Poor Cornelius is having some problems over there. For the committee, certainly to have a direction that we need to go in and to be clear about that, and as well as our community and our parents to understand exactly what our role is. So the suggestions to the charter came to myself, and we came to a consensus to bring the charter to the Board of Ed vote, and that is what we are going to do right now. So I am going to go ahead and read the charter. Hopefully you all had a chance to look at this. The purpose of the District 67 Education Committee is to provide a forum for vetting and discussing major educational initiatives, to provide representative board and community feedback, insight, and direction to the District 67 administration relative to curriculum, instruction, technology assessment, and district goals. And it is to provide feedback, insight, and direction to the District 67 board as a whole regarding current and/or future educational initiatives. Like all board committees, the Education Committee does not have the authority to approve or change district curriculum. Only the District 67 School Board as a whole can approve changes to the curriculum. The charter goes on to list membership, the parameters therein, including the current members, the committee activities and the areas of focus, and the meeting timing, meaning how often they meet, and the compliance to open meetings acts, including that the minutes will be posted on our website after approval. So one of the important things that I wanted to state here, and I know that Mr. Folker is going to give his committee charter soon,
was I want to thank Mr. Folker for really leading the charge here, and I know Mr. Borkowski felt the same way, that all three of our committees share our charters be aligned wherever possible. It makes it much more coherent to not only the people who are part of the committee, but from the outside looking in. So thank you for that, and I know he's going to share his soon, and I know Mr. Schuler is still in the process of working on his finance and operations charter. We do not vote at this time, is that correct?
That is correct. Well, we have
Okay.
a section for that which will be coming up. But
Okay, we'll come back to that later. I will continue with the Education Committee report. We also had a discussion about the math program. The adoption is going very well K through 4, as we have adopted the Bridges math program in those grades. Teacher feedback is that students are grasping concepts and really communicating what those concepts are. Bridges will be moved into 5th grade next year, and all teachers are on board with that. In grades 5 through 8, math classes will do straddling, which means, for instance, in 6th grade, math will include 6th and 7th and components of 7th grade as well. And when you get into 7th grade, that curriculum will include components of 8th grade as well. This is in order to prepare for high school readiness. 8 teachers will be attending the NCTM conference in New Orleans this April, and I'm assuming this is the National Council of Something and Math. Teaching math. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. That's right. The Agile Mind program will still be a tool in 5th through 8th grade math, as it has valuable real-life connections. However, we have learned from teachers and students alike that there will be a selection of supplemental books for math that students in grades 5 through 8 will be using. And these selections of the books for math will be driven by the document of learning outcomes that Lauren and Lori are in the process of creating alongside our faculty. Mr. Simic also reviewed the math sequencing from grades 4 through 12, which is always enlightening to see and see again. And then we understand why straddling needs to go on throughout the middle school years. Lauren Grieve asked how we supplement as it pertains to current 6th graders, and it was responded that pre-testing, looking at learning outcomes, as well as adjusting and pulling from resources so gaps can be filled, and math intervention as needed is done as well. A suggestion was made to add K through 4 curriculum, to add to that curriculum as opposed to trying to fit multiple years in at the 5th through 8th level, and it's something to think about, certainly. Then we moved on to the science update, and of course, much of the science update has to deal with the term that we keep using, STEM, we keep hearing it, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So a discussion took place regarding where are we? Are we tracking our results? Are we where we need to be? Lauren Fagel discussed next generation science standards, that it's similar to the Common Core standards, the focus on mastery of high-level skills. We discussed how currently in our elementary classrooms that science is a pull-out versus an in-classroom experience, and there was an interesting discussion that followed therein, and that there would need to be extensive training before science could actually come into the classroom, which isn't on the table at this time. It was just something that was discussed. And we also heard from community member Sudhar Krishnaswamy that he emphasized partnering opportunities with community and universities, which is something that has come through loud and clear throughout our visioning exercises. We also discussed LASIC. We discussed that the current program is actually something that we should call CT-PIP. It is an immersion program that isn't a true immersion program, as the average time span is about 120 minutes as opposed to a half day, if I'm correct there. And it is a one-off program, so many of the things that Mr. Simic discussed today, and we discussed everything from do we need to consider lowering the number of languages we offer to the idea of expanding certain languages at younger grade levels. So really it was a review of what Mr. Simic went over this evening. Future agenda items, there was a request by the community members, and I did send this to Lauren and Lori, that perhaps Renee DeVore, Anthony, who teaches DPM STEM, and Judy Epke speak to the group regarding the vision for STEM and the implications that lie therein, and if this is done during a board workshop, that the committee members of this education committee will be notified proactively. We adjourned, and we will meet again for the last time this year in April. And is there anything that anyone else would like to add? I know several of us were there that morning. Thank you all.
Thank you for that report. The next report is the Board Finance and Operations Committee, Mr. Rick Schuler.
Thanks, Bill. The Finance and Operations Committee did not meet. We did meet, though, with the Policy Committee and finalized or updated the policy regarding the district's fund balance, which will be up for approval. The Finance and Operations Charter has been rewritten, but I have not had it reviewed by anybody other than myself, and that's not a good thing. So that'll be delayed until next month's meeting. Next Operations and Finance Committee meeting will be sometime in March. We're trying to coordinate with William Blair, so as of now, we do not have a date. Is that correct? Targeting the 18th. Very good.
William Blair not being a member of the finance group, of course, but our investment bank. So, the next. Is that?
No, there's nothing I haven't told you about that. No.
Sorry. The next report is from the Policy Committee, Mr. Mike Borkowski.
The Board Policy Committee met twice since our last board meeting. On February 12th, we met at 10:30. Attendees included Jeff Folker, Lori Wilcox, Eileen Fowler, Mike Semick, Andy Hendrickson, Jen Hermes, and myself. At this meeting, we discussed three topics. Policy 640, which is on pilot programs, Policy 5210, 240, and 290, all related to suspensions, and Policy 7180, which is related to bullying and harassment. In each case, we discussed the language and the pros and cons. Later tonight, we will either be voting on or presenting for a first reading each of these policies, except for 5240, which is still under legal review. So rather than go through it now, I'll just wait and review at that point the discussion that we had with the pros and cons. But I won't do that twice. So that meeting was adjourned at 12:30. On February 19th, we met again, this time at 8:15. Attendees included Jeff, Bill, Rick, Mike, Lori, Eileen, Andy, Jen, and myself. We had two main topics at this meeting. First, as Rick just mentioned, in conjunction with the Finance Committee, we reviewed the current fund balance policy, and we made a few changes, which actually won't come before us tonight for a first reading. It's still under legal review. But the basic changes that we talked about were expanding. Currently, the policy says that our fund balance will be a range of 10%. We actually expanded that range to say 10 to 15%. And we also put in language that requires the board to receive a formal report and presentation from the administration if the fund balance falls outside of this range. So if the fund balance were to fall below the 10% threshold, the report would need to detail the recommended corrective action to be taken to bring the fund balance back into the 10 to 15% range. And if the fund balance is above the 15%, that report would detail the rationale for the additional funds, including details on planned uses of funds, timing of expenditures, and other pertinent information. In both cases, this report would be tied in with, but would be a separate document, a separate presentation from the budget and the 5-year projections. They all tie together, but this would be a separate way to highlight that information for the board. This policy edit will provide the administration more flexibility as it defines a slightly broader range, 10 to 15%, and it doesn't restrict our ability for more funds or less funds in any way, but it does provide more oversight and information to the board as it requires the actual reporting. So this, I think, is the best thinking of both the Policy Committee and the Finance Committee. As I said, it's still under legal review. The other topic we discussed was the process for giving salary increases, with the focus on the automatic 6% raises that are currently provided to all employees during the so-called retirement pipeline, which lasts 4 years. A number of perspectives were presented and debated. One perspective was that the automatic raises are justified and help attract and retain employees, that everyone does it, and that we would be at a competitive disadvantage to not do this practice. Another perspective discussed was that raises should be merit-based, not automatic, that great employees should be compensated handsomely for their work, that high salaries combined with great culture and real responsibility is the right answer to attracting and retaining talent, and that automatic large raises during the final 4 years of careers are a contributing factor to the financial mess our state is in. A third perspective was that if a public opinion survey was taken in our community, the belief is that virtually all taxpayers would be opposed to this practice. And a final comment was that this practice currently is required by most of our labor contracts, so we need to keep that in mind. The Compensation Committee also was represented during this discussion at our meeting, and this is an issue that will continue to be discussed jointly by the Compensation Committee and the Policy Committee. The hope is that some motion regarding this topic, whatever that may be, will be brought before the board, hopefully at the April Board of Ed meeting. We don't know what that motion is going to look like. It's still under discussion, but it's a topic that we're talking about. That concludes the Policy Committee report. Jeff, I'd ask if you, as a fellow Policy Committee member, have anything to add?
No, that covers it. Thank you.
And any questions or comments we're happy to take.
Thank you very much. The next report is from the Special Compensation Committee, chaired by Mr. Rob Lemke, or Dr. Robert Lemke.
Thanks, Bill. I thought I liked meetings, but I'm never going to be able to rival the Policy Committee. So.
Few people can.
You wish.
So the Special Committee on Compensation met on February 18th at 5 o'clock with Alan Albus, Bill Anderson, Jen Hermes, Mike Simic, and myself in attendance. It was noted that the committee was called into existence by Board President Bill Anderson. We agreed that the charge of the committee is to research compensation on District 67 administrators, shared service administrators, and District 67 exempt staff in order to provide the board with timely and relevant information with which to make compensation decisions in May. The committee will update the board of its work in executive sessions in March and April. We agreed that at present the committee does not intend to expand its research past administrator and exempt staff positions, but of course the committee would be willing to expand its scope if it asked to do so by the board. We began by agreeing that the committee should propose to the board a group of peer districts, which District 67 would then use when making inter-district comparisons for administrator and staff compensation, teachers' contract negotiations, test scores, and other comparable outcomes. We also agreed that one goal of the committee's work will be to create a structure that captures comparative salary and compensation data for administrators and exempt staff. The intent is to develop a structure that is informative to board members and is replicable in the future. And we concluded at 6:28 with 2 minutes to go.
Right on time. On your so, thank you very much,
Rob. You are
Rob.
invited to all Policy Committee meetings. That thoroughness.
That should be a policy, actually. So.
We will be having a Policy Committee next week to discuss that.
Okay. Thank you very much. We now come to liaison reports. These are groups to whom the members of the board serve as liaisons. The first one is the North Suburban Special Education District, Mr. Borkowski.
The NSSED did not meet, so we have no report.
Thank you very much. The next is Illinois Association of School Boards, EdRed, which is myself. There is no report this month. Next is the Curriculum Coordinating Committee, Lesley Fisher.
Thank you, Bill. The Curriculum Coordinating Committee did meet on February 25th. I'm sorry, that's today. We did meet on February 6th at 4 p.m. and led by Lauren Fagel and Lori Wilcox. And 2 items were on the agenda. The Common Core English Language Arts Materials Adoption, which is something we've been working on, and the update on LASIC. I am going to defer to Lauren Fagel on this as I was unable to attend the meeting. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lesley. Colleen Brueggemann, our Director of Curriculum Integration, was present at the Curriculum Coordinating Committee meeting. And we just like to use this committee as a place to discuss this very important process that we're undergoing. I think you heard me at the last board meeting share with you that we have adjusted our timeline. So what you see in front of you is the adjusted timeline. We are working to create a balanced literacy program. So in your mind, if you can envision the scales of justice with the two balances, try to imagine that visual but with multiple, not just two. Ultimately, the goal is to create a K-8 literacy program that gives a balanced diet, so to speak, of text for students, including fiction, nonfiction, content-based, phonics-based, all of those pieces in a balance. So it's not a clean and neat process. As you've heard me say, it's changed. It used to be have your vendor presentations, pick your vendor, order the boxes get delivered, and you implement. It's much more complicated now, but it's also, I think, much richer. And it's really exciting, especially as we think about different ways to integrate the disciplines and how a balanced literacy program could take that model forward. So really, that's what we talked about. Colleen did bring some samples for committee members to review. You'll see that a piece of Phase 3 was a materials fair at each of the 5 buildings where Colleen basically set up shop for a couple of hours. We're just giving multiple opportunities for all teachers in all grade levels to see what's out there, whether it's through attending the Language Arts Social Studies Committee meeting, coming to CCC, stopping by when she shows materials. There's a lot of field testing going on right now, but it's being done in a very thoughtful way. Students are still getting their core literacy instruction as it was planned, but they're having an opportunity to field test great materials with kids, great supplemental materials from National Geographic, from Great Books Foundation. Just really, it's really an exciting time. We just want to be thoughtful about any big decisions and big purchases we make. So we've spread it out, and we'll be coming to you in November with a recommendation for a core literacy program, which would kind of be the center of the balance. But you'll have lots of updates between now and then.
How does a field test work? It replaces what they would normally be used?
What's being field tested is strictly supplemental. So you might have, especially the National Geographic Ladders series, which are content-based, mostly science, interest books, and they call them ladders because they're available in different reading levels, but they look very similar. Teachers have just really gravitated to those. So it's very easy to infuse that into a social studies or a science lesson without. We're not replacing core content. We're just infusing the classrooms with really updated, content-based materials that are available at different levels. So you're reading the book on volcanoes, I'm reading a book on volcanoes. Yours is at one step on the ladder, mine is at a different step on the ladder. And we can't really even tell the difference, but our teacher knows that she has strategically given your text to you and mine text to me.
And how do you evaluate the field test? Is it mostly anecdotal data from the teachers, or is there objectivity to it? How do you do that? Right
now, that's what we're looking for. What a big piece of this process will be is the rollout of our learning targets. And you've heard me talk about student-friendly learning targets aligned to the Common Core using what we call is I can statements. Once those targets are in place, everything starts to build around there. And so the real evaluation will come when we see how are students performing when assessed on these learning targets. If they're not performing well, are there other materials that we can use? The materials shouldn't be what's creating the success on any assessment. It should be the design of the instruction around the materials, all aiming towards that target. So again, it used to be, I think, is this textbook series or is this vendor, Harcourt or Pearson, are they serving us well? We're shifting the emphasis now to what is the end goal? What do we want students to know and be able to do by the end of this lesson, this unit, this trimester, this year? How are we going, where are they now? Assess them. Where do we want them to go? And how do we get them from point A to point B? And we can try materials, and if we're not getting results, we try different materials. And if one set of materials works for one student, great, keep going. If it's not working, shift. That's the direction we're going. Very personalized.
Just a question. As much as technology is being infused into so much of our curriculum, when I imagine, whether it's great books or Pearson, and I know it doesn't maybe come all in a box anymore,
yeah,
but I imagine all of these hardcover books. Is that still where we're at? I know that my daughter in 5th grade does, you know, the weekly vocab on online, which seems to work very well. I'm just wondering, in these new programs that you're looking at and that you're vetting throughout the teachers, is there a technology component that seems prevalent?
It would be a component, but we're still looking at purchasing lots of physical hard copy texts for students to work with, especially at the K-4 level. Again, through a personalized approach, some students might benefit from a text-to-speech application on an iPad. They might really do well using a Chromebook to highlight or to separate out, but we're not looking at anything that would mean kind of an abandonment. We're still wanting kids to have books in their hands is still really important to all of us.
So, Lauren, to quote Sam Malone, books are our friends, so I'm glad we're going to buy some books. I'm wondering, when's the last time we did buy books like this?
Well, according to our experience so far, it's been a while. Teachers were really hungry for up-to-date materials, and so that's been a twofer with the field testing process. As here's an opportunity to, again, infuse classrooms with more up-to-date materials. We have a long way to go with that, especially in special education. We have materials that are far, far too old. There is just better stuff out there. So we're trying to, you know, package the processes together. And I'll tell you, it's not really very, I mean, our materials and purchasing is not something that's documented as clearly as I would like. So in my mind, the idea is that if our whole team were to leave the district, someone could pick up and move forward and know exactly when the last time certain mass purchases were made. Not that I plan on picking up and leaving the district. The other topic we discussed at CCC was LASIC, and again, we used that committee as a way to process through a lot of the different ideas and thoughts and challenges and concerns. And the timing on that was good. The input we got from our teachers on that committee, our parent on the committee, was excellent.
Thank you for filling in.
Sure.
Great job.
Thank you.
She had a visual and everything. Apparently didn't. Thank you very much.
The next committee is the Spirit of 67 Foundation. Lesley Fisher.
The Spirit of 67 met on February 11th at 9 a.m. And Mr. Simic spoke. He promoted the book talk. He promoted the vision forums. And he also engaged them in an exercise vetting options for Mandarin in our language program for the upcoming year for kindergarten. Was it the same? Was it one? Was it none? It was a very worthwhile exercise. Suzanne Sands, the nominating chair for APT, and this is something that's going on that's different than in years past. At Spirit meetings, there is an APT representative, and at APT meetings, there is a Spirit representative, which is, I think, a really positive thing, seeing as the two work hand in hand. APT being the parent volunteers in our school community, and Spirit being the fundraising arm. So they do work hand in hand. So it's nice to see that they're supporting each other and communicating very well at the meetings. So Suzanne Sands, the nominating chair for APT, shared the incoming slate for open exec board positions, and the voting will take place, as it always does, at the annual APT meeting, which will be held on March 12th at 9 a.m. at Croya. And Mike Simic is the guest speaker this year. And he is going to be engaging a bigger part of our community in the visioning process at that time. And something the APT is doing differently at that time is they are including, in years past, APT members were invited, paying dues, APT members. This year, the entire community is invited and encouraged to come. And voting, of course, will take place for the incoming slate at that time. The home tour is Thursday, May 8th. If you have not been, I encourage you to attend.
Not only does it raise fantastic funds for our Spirit, it also is a very enjoyable day of visiting different homes in different areas of our district. And the Grants Committee has completed its approval process. It was led by Molly Sarver and completed in record time, I do believe. And I was very happy to be a part of the process, and we have a lot of important, valuable grants that we are approving, and we are excited to do so. The next meeting for the Spirit will be Tuesday, March 11th at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next thing we have on the agenda is APT meeting. Lesley Fisher.
Last but not least, I'm going to speak first about the APT executive meeting, and then I'm going to, Jeff Foker was kind enough to attend, and I think he was glad to attend, the Everett APT meeting this month. We are trying as a board to connect with APT building presidents and to attend one meeting before the year is over. So appreciative that you were there, Jeff. Let me go over briefly and then I'll circle back to you. The APT Executive Board met on February 12th at 9 a.m. and Officer Christensen joined us. You may have seen him. He is newer to our buildings. He is a Lake Forest College graduate and he is housed mainly at DPM. His duties include but are not limited to cell phone law enforcement, cyberbullying and internet safety, drugs and alcohol prevention, and he also supplements the curriculum in response to teacher request. Superintendent Mike Simic was also there and very much gave the same message as he did at the Spirit Board meeting. He promoted the book talk, and he talked about vision forums. He also illustrated a rapidly changing world of education in college, and I just wanted to share two tidbits. Probably one. 15% of the employees that Google is hiring at this time do not have college educations. They come right out of high school. And that is a staggering and interesting data piece. The DPM East Student Council hosted their halfway party where 160 kids attended and apparently had a fantastic time. And National Nutrition Month, which is coming up in March, will feature spices at the elementary school and healthier choices exposed to middle school students. For example, the idea of selecting a Sunkist, which is not served in our buildings, versus selecting an Izzy, which is in our buildings, and the ingredients therein are going to be showcased to students, and they'll select different items on different days. The next meeting of the APT, of course, as I said before, is Wednesday, March 12th at the annual meeting. Thank you very much. Jeff Foker, can you please report on Everett's APT meeting?
Certainly. Have any of the board members had a chance to attend any of the other APT? Tomorrow morning. Okay. So, Lesley, thank you for sharing the responsibility. I truly enjoyed it. I have not, being a Cherokee parent for the last 9 years, I had not had a chance to really get to know some of the other elementary school buildings, and it was truly a joy to get into the Everett APT meeting to see how things are done differently and how they're done similarly. It was quite eye-opening, and it was fun to get to see a lot of people that I wouldn't normally see and meet another part of the community. So, my purpose while I was there, and Rick, you can take this for tomorrow if you want, but I didn't want to usurp any of the board liaison responsibilities for the committee for the APT. So I provided basically an overview of the board role, try to give the APT an understanding of where we fit in the decision-making process and how easy and oftentimes difficult it is to get things done from a board perspective relative to all of the various legal and process issues and barriers we have to address. I talked a little bit about my key learnings over the first 8 months or so that I've been on this role, and tried to share with people kind of some insight as to what it's like to be a board member. And I also tried to share my enthusiasm for the talented and wonderful group of administrators that we have in the district. And it was made much easier by the fact that Mrs. Fagel and Dr. Wilcox preceded me and did a phenomenal job of answering questions for the board And even got their picture taken. I didn't get my picture taken. I was kind of bummed out.
Mr. Anderson wants to know when he gets to meet these wonderful administrators.
Soon. When you're done with jury duty. I decided to stick around and listen to the meeting, and was glad I did, because Everett's doing some great stuff. And Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong on some of these, but they collected over 3,400 books for the book drive, which was amazing. And really, the key thing I took away was the 100th year celebration that they have over at Everett is just phenomenal. And kudos to Dr. Weimer and the APT and the parents that are leading it and the kids, because they have ingrained the celebration throughout the entire year. They've ingrained it into the curriculum. It's in the art program, it's in music, it's in social studies. They've got a mural commissioned with Mark McMahon, I believe, correct? Who's doing a mural for the school, which is amazing. They took the 100-year school picture, which I know a lot of us probably saw prior to this. They've had sportswear and car bags made up. On the 100th day of school, correct me if I'm wrong, they had parents come and represent the various decades of the last 100 years and asked people to bring in artifacts from each decade. So you had people that had artifacts from the 60s and the 50s and the 40s, and kids could ask questions about how did you use this, what was this about, what's a rotary phone, things like that. So it's just fantastic. And then I guess there's a celebration on April 24th at the school to kind of be a culmination of this whole thing. So even though I'm not an Everett parent, I'm going, because it sounds like a lot of fun. So congratulations to Everett School. They're doing a great job. And at last, I just want to thank, is it Umang? Is that her? Umang? For inviting me. I had a great time, and for the board for having me, and I hope I added some value. Did I add value? All right, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Next report is Beth Clemmensen, who's going to talk about the Mission Vision Goals Project, which she has been heading up along with Mr. Simic, and both boards had a retreat since the last meeting, which was, I think, just really, really productive. And Beth is going to talk about that and update us on the process.
Well, after it seems like months of planning, we finally got our group together. We had 18 enthusiastic members of our retreat. We heard this cube place is great for creativity and collaboration, so we decided to use it ourselves. And it was a great kind of cross-functional day with the board members, administrators, teachers, parents, a lot of energy, a lot of great ideas. We are now looking to kind of take our straw man draft out into the community, out to the teachers. We've started those engagement conversations already. We've had one with parents, and we've met with 3 of the schools so far. And a lot of good feedback. We're asking for kind of any way we can get your feedback, we're happy to take it. There's a form that Mrs. Whipple has been so kind to develop. She's putting it up on the website, and there'll be a link to our presentation. We would love spontaneous comments if you're at the meeting, as well as, emails, phone calls, what have you, in terms of are we on the right path. We're very excited about what came out of it, and I'm not going to tell you what it was because I want you to go to the website once it's up there. It's up, and take a look at it. So it's been a great process. From here, we are going to take all that feedback to heart and continue to refine. One of the things that's been very telling is Mr. Simic has gone into meetings and he has asked the audience, do you know what the current vision is? And judging by the blank looks and lack of sound in the room, we know that we are on the right path to be doing this process right now, because clearly we don't have a well-articulated vision, and I'm excited in the next couple months we will. So thanks to everyone for participating.
Comments from board members?
I'd just like to commend Beth on the stellar job she is doing alongside Anne. Both of you are putting so much work, and it's Shani, of course, she's not here, but both of you are putting so much time into this, and I think Mr. Simic on his tour is doing a great job of communicating the message and what we're wanting from people. And thank you to parents like you who come and who give valuable input. So it does take a village, and I'm appreciative for everyone's work here because it's really exciting and it's really important.
I'd be curious, Ann, have people started coming back to the website with feedback on some of the questions that we posted during the community forum?
The questions we have been sending out and sending reminders, and we've gotten great response. And even going to the website, we just today launched the page with all the information from the forums, but I have not started promoting it because we'd really like people to go to the forum first rather than that. But we are doing follow-up as we meet with the different schools, so the schools have all been sent the reminder. And on that page is the video as well as some of the charts and data that Shani's pulled together, our mission and our core values, and then there's an interactive form where you can give your input on there. But my thought was let tomorrow night happen from 7 to 9. We hope our parents come out, and then we'll do reminders that if you missed it or if you did attend, be sure to look at these resources. But we feel like it's really valuable to hear the presentation first. And then I've heard from some parents more reminders than we'd ever like to see, but we've gotten great response on all the questions as well as the surveys, anywhere from 300 to 500 responses, which is phenomenal for something like this. And I think Shani's really enjoying having that rich of data to put into the presentation. So you're welcome to see it. It's promoted on all the home pages as of this afternoon, and that page is built, but we won't start promoting it too actively. But as I say, with staff, we already have, because we want them to reflect on those and see those statements and have time to really then give us some good input.
Beth and myself have already received input from community members, and I know you were there. I don't know if you received any, but just forwarding that on to Ann and Beth and Shani and letting them know about it.
Yeah, and just getting that feedback is so important. You know, we had a session earlier this week, and then I went to Costco and had 2 parents. I had another mini session with them. So, I mean, it's just great to kind of all come together. I know we've gotten a bunch of emails. We appreciate all of it because I think we will end up in a place that is much richer for everybody being part of the conversation.
I have been quantifying the amount of responses for the questions in your board updates on the weekends, and I'll go ahead and do that as well by school, and if we can divide it out that way, or at least from the questions, to let you know exactly how many and how the response is going to, so if that's helpful.
Thank you, Ann.
It's fair to say so far we've been very pleased with the response rate.
I think so, and our consultant has said she was overwhelmed. And we do find that with each reminder, you know, we track it and then we do the reminders, and it generally pops it up quite a bit. So I think we've been successful in getting responses. And across a broad population, we have community members as well as students. And then at the high school, we've actually attracted 65 feeder schools, and you know they serve a little broader population than 67. So there's been a nice response there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Beth. We now come to action items which are on the agenda. The first one is the approval of the Education Committee Charter. Ms. Fisher?
As I have read the Education Committee Charter previously, do you want to move?
Well, may I guess, so may I have a motion to approve the Education Committee Charter?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is approval of the Policy Committee Charter. Mr. Borkowski, do you have any comments before we?
Sure, I'll give a quick overview. I'm not going to read it to you. It is in your packet. But a few highlights and a few comments. The general purpose, there's 3 bullet points at the top. Ensure policy compliance with state law, provide an effective forum for vetting, proposing, and discussing topics that might fall under the umbrella of policy, and to provide feedback, insight, and direction to the administrative team. I view the policy committee as a place where controversial topics can come up as well as mundane topics. It's an appropriate forum where topics that board members, administrators, or even the public want discussed, and they can come up. All of those we have examples of all of those things happening over the past 6 months. It's a place where we can step back from the day-to-day operations and discuss these topics at a policy level, which is where the board should be, versus getting into the administrative day-to-day. In my opinion, it plays a critical role and lets us have a place to potentially have some of these uncomfortable conversations that we need to have and avoid knee-jerk reactions to operational issues. From a practical perspective, and this is how I try to operate the committee, if there's at least one board member, whether he's on the committee or she is on the committee or not, if they feel passionate about a topic, I want to encourage the discussion at the policy committee, and generally will bring the topic to the full board for discussion, even if it's a minority opinion, just because I think the full board should be involved in these discussions. I try to include and invite members of the other board committees because a lot of the times things that we're discussing impact other committees, the finance, the fund balance being a perfect example of that that recently happened. So we had a healthy discussion putting the charter together. Jeff was a big help in making it consistent with the others and doing a much better job with the words than I, and I think it represents the committee's best thinking. I move we approve the policy committee charter as presented.
I second that.
With the motion moved and a second, could we have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. We now move to approval of a couple of policies. The first is approval of policy 7180 and 7185 update, and this is a first reading. Mr. Borkowski.
So I'm going to actually deal with these two separately. The first issue is 7180. This is a first reading which I'm going to suggest that we can waive. This policy deals with bullying. It's a little bit out of the ordinary situation with this policy that I want everybody to understand. We learned recently that that the board needs to formally review this policy every 2 years, and we need to approve it, even if there's no changes, in order to be in compliance with an upcoming audit, which I believe is going to be taking place in March. So in a moment, I'm going to request that we waive the first reading and proceed immediately to approving this as written with no changes. There's two scenarios where we're permitted to waive a first reading, and one of them is when it's necessary or prudent in order to meet special conditions or to be legally compliant. And this situation is what we face here tonight. Having said that, while we do need to somewhat check the box to be in compliance with the upcoming audit, there's a reason the auditors want a full review of this policy every 2 years. And while I believe we're satisfying the letter of the law, I don't really feel that we had a chance to satisfy the intent of the law. So while we're going to move to waive the first reading and then approve this for the audit purposes, this policy is going to be more thoroughly reviewed and discussed at likely to be one of our upcoming policy committee meetings. So you'll be hearing about it again most likely in a few months. With that, I first move that we waive the first reading for the policy 7180.
To clarify, we're going to act separately on 7180 and 7185.
Yes, they're two different issues.
Okay. All right. So motion.
So I just moved that we waive the first reading for 7180.
Is there a second?
Second that.
So roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And now I move that we approve policy 7180 as is currently written.
A second? Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
No.
Oh.
I wanted to ask one thing here as I'm looking over this. If we, there's a component of this, hang on one second, that talks about, it's technology related. And
if it's a school computer or similar device. What if it is a personal device used on school property?
I think it's a great question. I'm going to note it. So tonight, the intent is to reapprove it for the audit purposes, and then we're actually going to truly more thoroughly review it. So I'm going to take that as something that we do need to talk about.
It's actually in the beginning, number 3, through the transmission of information from a school computer network, or other similar electronic school equipment, but some of that might be personal equipment used at a school.
I will make sure.
Thank you.
To clarify, is your vote yes or no?
I'll vote yes.
Mr. Folker?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We now come to 7185, update, first reading, Mr. Borkowski.
So 7185, this policy deals with teen dating violence. This was actually part of a batch of what I call press suggested edits. Press is edits that the state sends us periodically on policies. At our last board meeting, you may recall that we voted on most of these press items. The administration had requested that this particular one, they'd like additional time to review this policy and the suggestions from the state. The administration completed their review, and they recommend that this policy in front of us now is appropriate. The policy committee agrees with the administration's recommendations. Given that press items are considered statutory suggestions, we are permitted to waive the first reading and proceed directly to approval. So unless there's questions, I would move that we would waive the first reading for policy 7185.
Is there a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote?
Wait, I think we should discuss this a little. I mean, the point of waiving readings is not because we're comfortable with it. I mean, we should give the community time to weigh in on things. And so this seems to be an important policy to me. And unless, like the other one, Mike, you seem to say that there was real reason to vote it through today. But if there's no urgency, I don't understand why we don't post it and vote it next month. Our district should have the right to weigh in.
Isn't this bound by the audit as well?
No, this one is not. Rob's point is 100% valid. The prior one, there is a sense of urgency because of the audit. It's every 2 years. This one, that's not the case. We often do this with press items, but I'm 100% in agreement with you, and I am happy.
And I'm not saying I have any problem with it, but I think that's the point of having 2 readings, is not just so our 7 eyes can read it, but so the community can read it.
Yeah. And many press items are more or less are somewhat sort of procedural and everything. This is obviously a very relevant.
Most of them are legislative, but I don't think that one is necessarily.
Germane
However,
topic.
it was in the packet that went to the public, if that helps.
To my understanding is this one's not required for the audit. Right. So I'd like to withdraw the waiving of the first reading.
This one is not required for the audit. The only one that was required for the audit was the other one. It has to be updated every 2 years, and it hadn't been updated.
Okay.
So let's not waive the first reading, and let's have
a motion to pass this on first reading.
And then we'll pass it again
next month if people read it and like it. So, okay, may I have a motion for the first reading for 7185?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson? Aye. Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion reviewed motion carries.
Eileen is losing it over there. So okay. Okay, we now come to approval policies 5210, 5290, and 640. Mr. Borkowski.
So I'm going to batch these where they make sense and not where they don't. And there will not be any more. The rest of these that we're going to talk about tonight are all just first readings. There's no sense of urgencies on any of these. So I want to talk about the next 2, which is policy 5210 and 5290. These 2 policy changes are very similar, so I suggest we can discuss and vote on them together. they're also important. And so I want to sort of point out to the board that if we're dozing off at this point, this one you want to actually pay attention to. These policies, we are formally delegating some of our authority. We're formally delegating some of our authority as a board to the administration. These two policies deal with how resignations are accepted. Currently, before resignation can be formally accepted, the board needs to vote on it to accept it. This can obviously take some time depending on our schedule, and sometimes employees change their mind during that time. In these two policy sections, we are proposing to delegate our authority to receive and accept resignations, and we're to delegate that directly to the superintendent, meaning the superintendent can accept a resignation without the board approval. And to be clear, the board does not then get a chance to rescind that acceptance after the fact if we don't agree. The superintendent's decision becomes final. There's a pro and there's a con. The benefit of this is that people do change their minds, and there are many times that we end up in a better place if the resignation can be immediately accepted. So by giving the superintendent that authority, the change of heart situations are minimized to the degree possible. The downside, just to be clear with everyone, is that there are times that the board may want to actually fire a person instead of accepting a resignation, if for nothing else to make a statement that we want this person fired, we're not looking for resignation. The effects of firing someone for cause can be different than accepting a resignation. If the board really wanted to fire a person and the superintendent accepted the resignation, we cannot go back and undo the resignation and say, no, we're firing the person. So the policy committee discussed both the pros and the cons, and the best thinking of our group was that the upside outweighed the potential downside. Thus, we bring these two policies, and the two policies are virtually identical. I believe one deals with teachers and one deals with support staff, but virtually the same language is in both of them, delegating our authority to the superintendent. So we bring these two policies for discussion and then a possible motion for a first reading. But before going to that, I think we really should open this up for discussion.
I assume our council have looked at these and approved
Yes,
them.
all of the policies we're talking about tonight, including these, our council has looked at. There's actually a third one, which we will likely talk about next month, that goes into a little bit greater detail that is still in legal review, but these two have been passed by our legal counsel.
That was my question as well. I think we did have a good discussion on the pros and cons. There are both. I still believe the pros outweigh the cons and would recommend it.
I would ask either of the mics. The con that you say, Mike, is valid, but there's also, it's possible that not only do we want to fire somebody, we want to say something about somebody in that process. I actually think that might even be more important than firing them. Maybe we want to say something to another school district, maybe we want to say something to the public, and so would this policy prevent the school board from censuring a former employee, saying something in public? I mean, is it once the, that part, I mean, so I understand the con of fire versus resign, but is there anything else we're giving up?
Ideally, this wouldn't happen without a conversation between the superintendent and at least a couple board members.
But that's not required.
It is not, and what it is certainly customary that when there's a high profile anything, that the superintendent is on the phone with at least the board president and consulting there. But to answer the question more specifically, the ability for a board to speak publicly in a personnel issue is extremely limited. And so the ability to exact a pound of flesh, if you will, in public would expose the board to all sorts of litigation, possible litigation, grievances of various kinds, whether it would be in civil court or otherwise. So in terms of that, The instances that I've seen where a board may want to fire somebody and a resignation has been accepted, that comes up very, very occasionally. What comes up much more often, and this is where the balance comes in, I think Mike did an extremely even-handed representation of the pros and the cons of it, are that the clock can literally tick for 60, 75, 90 days before a resignation is official, because that resignation does not begin to tick, if you will, until the board has accepted, and depending on the age of the employee, the rescission period is 21 days following that, even after a resignation has been accepted. So if an employee resigns after the board meeting in July, the day after the board meeting in July, we don't have another board meeting until September. So it's a late date in September, and then 21 days after that. So that whole intervening time, things can happen. And one of the things that in my earlier life that benefited the board significantly was the ability to have these things acted upon quickly. And I don't want to get into too much detail because some of it can be sensitive, but there are times when the organization enjoys a disproportionate benefit because, bang, the clock starts immediately. But there is a balance here, and that's something that I was quick to point out in our policy meeting. This is a policy that was approved in my last life, and that's the reason that it's on the docket right now.
I guess where I am concerned here is that when I look at policies, I try not to personalize them. Try not to see you as the superintendent and the 7 of us as board members. I don't know if this works if other people are in place.
One of the things that could certainly happen in the meantime is find out who else has these policies in our area. Jeff asked, how do you feel about a 2-month approval period on policies? And Rob, to your point, I like taking 2 months for this very reason. Is you can approve an initial reading, go and get information from other places and say, okay, this is what we have found. Have they had any instances where this is a problem? Have they not? And Jen and Alan, because of their relationships, I mean, it really pays to have the current and the former president of the business officials working for your school district, and I'm constantly amazed at how fast they can get really good information. And this is a good example of bringing back some valuable research for us.
We could look at what other districts do, but honestly, I think we understand the issue. I don't really need to see. I'm not speaking for other board members. I don't need to see what other districts do. I get it. I think we all understand the issue. We've even lived the issue. I mean, we know the bad example of what can happen, so I really don't need to see more data or what other districts do.
Do people feel it needs to be more clearly articulated that the superintendent confer with at least the board president prior to accepting a resignation?
So we can take that back. We'll have to convene with the lawyers to see exactly how we're going to do that. But the feedback is that prior to the superintendent accepting the resignation, there needs to be some level of conversation, approval. I'm looking maybe for a little bit more input from the board.
But that can't be an approval, right? Because he can't, the board president can't make an approval on the board's behalf. So that's a little squishy as well. I'm fine with that compromise if you want to force that discussion. But at the end of the day, if the president of the board thinks, what does that mean? If he thinks that the superintendent or the administration should not proceed with that, do we have authority at that point, or
can you put
what does that mean?
Can you put language in, as we've done with other policies, similar to things like it is intended, or it is, in other words, it's not a requirement, but it is, we've got that in other policies that we've discussed, where the language is intentionally directive, but not specifically, required.
I am not the expert here. I would assume that we likely can. I'm not sure that accomplishes. Leslie's point is absolutely correct, that you do not make policy with people in mind. You don't make policy with the 8 of us sitting at this table, including the superintendent. You make policy that works for everyone. And so if you're thinking about a bad case scenario, having vague words does not accomplish Leslie's point. I certainly am happy to take this back, and I think it'll be a conversation with our lawyers. My gut is, with regards to Rick's point, it may be an issue. Are we really delegating our authority to the board president then to make that decision in the conversation with the superintendent? It gets, I'm not entirely certain, where that's headed. If we're really saying the superintendent needs to convene with the board president, I'm not even sure if it's legal or not. And if it's if it becomes a small group of people, then we get into OMA issues, and is it a meeting? So I think it makes, right. Then you just call a special meeting, and that may be the real answer, is if you want it to happen fast, you call a special meeting with 48 hours notice and have a compliance with OMA and deal with it then. At a minimum, I'm happy to take it off the table, and we can have further conversation.
I wouldn't do that. I would say I support exactly what Rick said. I wouldn't mind research with other districts, but the fact is we know what the policy says. We have a month to think about it. And I would call the question, and let's, I think these words are right. I think the change of saying consult with the board president is wrong. So let's pass this, and let's vote in a month. And it may go up, it may go down. I think it's the right policy if we're going to change to this policy, to a policy that says something like this. So I would call the question.
The way it looks right now, you want to keep this?
We're not passing it tonight. We're passing the reading of it tonight. Yeah.
The input.
And I would not change the wording to it.
Sorry, the idea of the first reading is really just to pass it and then to spend some time reviewing it, looking at it. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, to be clear, Lesley just kind of asked me about taking input. If we change, we can do a first reading tonight. If we want to change a word in it, we need to do another first reading next month. We don't do a first reading and change it next month and approve it. If we tweak it in any way, we do another first reading. Beth, do you have thoughts that you'd like to share?
I think that's fine. I mean, you're either going to approve it as is. I mean, it's the current best thinking. So we can move forward, but still take a month to mull it over. And if we feel that we need to land in a different place in a month, then let's do that and take an additional month before we approve it.
Lesley, are you comfortable with this on first reading?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Then, given that input, I'll move that we approve
There's
a
two more
first reading.
policies, though, in that first waiver. You didn't discuss the other two policies that are on there.
I'm just right now discussing policies 5210 and 5290. 640 I'm going to discuss separately. It's an entirely different issue.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a motion that I move that we approve the first reading of policy 5210 and 5290.
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next is policy 640.
Another interest. You okay down there, Mr. Lemke? I told you to stay awake for that particular policy. The next policy is another interesting one. This is policy 640, which is in regards to the pilot programs and how they work. This policy took a long time for us to get to a good place, but I think we finally did get to a place that works for both the administration and perhaps the board. This section deals with how pilot programs are implemented and what oversight, if any, is required by the board. The impetus of this discussion really was the Mandarin program and the role that the board did or did not have in approving that and how we want to do things moving forward. And somewhat as an aside, I think as we talk about the Mandarin program and what we do going forward, the effects on the district and how we want to do things in the future, I think this policy actually becomes part of that answer for the community. An interesting thing happened as we began to examine this policy as it currently exists. The administration actually kind of came out and said they didn't necessarily know the details of this current policy in place, and the general consensus was that the policy was not particularly being followed, and if it were followed as is, it would be overly cumbersome for them to be in compliance with it. So the administration didn't particularly like the current policy as it was written. Meanwhile, the board, at least the people on the policy committee, had somewhat of a different perspective, finding the current policy not appropriate either, as some of the language was wishy-washy. So neither group particularly liked what was on the books, and it wasn't really being followed. As a group, we pretty quickly defined two objectives that we wanted to accomplish with the new version of this policy. Number one, we really wanted to avoid squashing innovation. And we can easily squash innovation by requiring a lot of reports and approvals on the front end. That can result in people not being innovative and not doing creative ideas simply because it's too much work to get started. At the same time, we really wanted the board to not only be informed, but to have appropriate oversight and with an approval function, and defining what the appropriate level for the board approval became a topic of much debate as well. So after a lengthy and arduous process of 3 meetings, we came to a solution that I believe accomplished both of these goals. The key, I'm not going to read you the policy, but I'm going to say the 4 key items in the proposed policy. Number 1, the administration can start a pilot program anytime they want without formal board approval. Number 2, the exception to that statement is if a pilot program requires students to be transported out of their normal school building in order to participate. In that particular exception, the board approval would be needed to get the program started. If the program, so now we're done with the exception, if the program is to continue beyond 1 school year and it costs more than $25,000 in annual expenses, then formal board approval is required for it to continue beyond that first year. As well, it's expected that the administration provide the board, either in the full session or at the Ed Committee, a review of all pilot programs periodically throughout the year, and the policy suggests what might be included in that overview. So under this policy, the board would have awareness of all pilot programs, at least through the Ed Committee. We would vote on programs that affect neighborhood school boundaries before they begin, and we would vote on all others that are above a sufficient size, which we said was $25,000, before they continue into year 2, allowing the administration to start programs and be innovative as much as possible. So I fully support this policy. I think it's a good balance between the board oversight and the need for innovation. And before making a motion, I'd like to open for any discussion that board members might have on it or questions.
So I'd say I think the policy committee deserves a lot of credit for writing this. The old policy was horrible. And I'm going to support this because I think it's actually close to the best we can do. I will note, just because it's in my nature, it doesn't define what pilot means. It doesn't define what project means. And of all things, it doesn't define what $25,000 means. What happens when some administrator has to spend half their time doing this? That's not going to be included in the cost. But given all those problems, this is so much better than what we've got. I really do commend the policy committee for hard work, because you're never going to solve the problems I just mentioned. And so I support this wholeheartedly.
I am in 100% agreement with every single thing that Rob just said. Very well written, clear as it can be without focusing on what exactly a pilot program is. Well written.
That being said, I mean, having been a part of the process, that was a question that came up. Should we and can we define what is meant by pilot program? If the pilot program is changing the curriculum in a grade in all schools for a year, is that really a pilot program, or is that a change to curriculum? I think we've left it vague. I personally would not have an issue if someone wanted to tighten that up a little bit and make it a bit more specific, but it was discussed.
I would just also comment, I know a lot of work went into this in the policy committee, and there's a danger sometimes when you have a concern that you sort of over-solve it or something. And I think I agree that this strikes a great balance. And, you know, we value all the innovation and creativity that goes into running the district. And I think a couple months ago, we counted there were something like two dozen pilot projects going on in the district, you know, almost at any given time. And that's part of what makes this district great. But the board does want to be up to speed and everything, so I support this policy as well.
Yeah, the last thing I do want to clarify is that this is buried within a curriculum development policy. So, you know, the expectation is that if you're asking or looking to do something that is more regarding the physical plant of the school, or that's not necessarily covered under this particular policy. So, do you need to get approval for spending money for stand-up desks? No. That's not what this is incorporated into. So.
May I have a motion to approve first reading of proposed board policy 640?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The next item on the agenda is approval of the World Language Program. Now, Mr. Simic presented in his presentation a couple of hours ago our outlook or his proposed plan for Mandarin in world education, world language education in the district. It includes a couple changes, including not starting this year's group of kindergartners in a Mandarin program. It also includes continuing Mandarin for everyone, you know, through elementary school. I don't know that this is written really in a document any more formally than what Mr. Simic presented, which obviously all the board members saw. So I guess I think we can call this approval of the World Language Program as presented by Mr. Simic earlier this evening. And with that, I'd ask for board comment or a motion to approve.
So, Bill, just to clarify, the crux of the issue is that we will not be offering world language instruction in any form for kindergarten.
That's correct, Mandarin or immersion or otherwise.
Can we say approval of the World Language Program for 2014 to 2015?
Yes, I think that would be advisable.
Yeah. So just to add clarity, we're saying that for those students already involved and enrolled in the Mandarin program, they will continue to the next grade level in the next school year.
I think we're saying they're going to continue
Correct.
through elementary school.
So that will continue through 4th grade at Cherokee School. Kindergarten will not have a world language option incorporated into its curriculum.
Correct.
And we will work to come back to the board by the April or possibly May, depending upon the mission and vision process, with a clear recommendation for the long-term outlook of the World Language Program.
Yes, there's an acknowledgement that this isn't a complete solution. but it addresses issues of incoming
But
students.
is that right, that we're limiting it to 2014 to 2015? Because if there's a child in first or second grade Mandarin immersion, aren't they?
They're good through elementary school.
So I'm thinking that's not
Oh, I see what you're
2014 to 2015, not for that.
You're right. I mean, you're right. If we want to put a line in the
I thought
sand right
we're
now that says,
approving that.
if you're in it all the way through
Yeah.
elementary right now, correct,
Yeah.
that's not
so
what that says.
I'm not sure
so.
that that's 2014, 2015.
I think the way Bill said it to begin with is right. We're approving what Mike presented tonight, and this is what Mike presented tonight. Both those comments are in there. It talks about
It is
what's
what he
happening for
presented. I just
kindergarten
got
next
thrown
year.
off by
I just think it's helpful to, before we vote, to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yes.
I'm just happy that everybody remembers what I said.
We need a refresher.
Actually, you want to do it again? Just kidding.
No, I think that's important, though. So we're saying that for this vote, we are approving the continuation of a Mandarin program for those children currently enrolled in the program throughout their entire elementary experience, or through grade 4.
Through grade 4.
All right, I'm sorry, yeah, theoretically that's still elementary, even though I call it middle school, but correct.
I move that we approve the world language program as presented by our famed superintendent 2 hours ago.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
May I have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Motion carries.
What about the non-Mandarin kids? Are they good?
I appreciate your comment. We have a time for public comment, and board members and administration are always available to talk, but not at this point in the meeting. So thank you. The next item on our agenda is approval of human resources items, which includes hiring, resignations, terminations, family and medical leave, absence, and change of status. Mr. Simic, do you have any comments?
I recommend we approve the human resources agenda as presented.
May I have a motion to approve the human resources items?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
A roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is the consent agenda, which includes approval of disbursements, minutes of a school holiday calendar hearing, minutes of a regular meeting, minutes of an executive session, minutes of a board workshop, recognition of the Schuler Deer Path art donation, and disposal of audio recordings. Are there any items in the consent agenda that a board member would like removed for further discussion?
I actually considered asking to remove the Renee Schuler donation, but I just want to say thank you. Pass it along. That's very nice.
I'll pass it along. You bet.
For me as well. It's just beautiful. So, hearing no formal requests, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Schuler?
Aye.
Mrs. Clemmensen?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. FOIA requests this month. We have one from Ms. Laura Rocafina of Lake Forest. Announcements. Continuing community mission, vision, goals meetings coming up. Wednesday, February 26th at Lake Forest High School West Campus. Thursday, February 27th, parent-teacher conferences is a half day of school. Friday, February 28th, parent-teacher conferences, no school. Tuesday, March 18th, Board of Education meeting, that's us, 7 p.m., Lake Forest High School West Campus. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Meeting is adjourned.